Thank you, Mayor and Council. I am excited to bring for you an update from our consultants that have been working with us for the last several months on reviewing our police academy training and curriculum. And so, as you remember, back in March, we provided you with a preliminary report based on the recommendations, both short-term and long-term, that they are providing, and a blueprint for how we would go forward. And you gave approval for that blueprint on moving forward with our cadet academy. We're here today to take that next step and ask for full confirmation of getting that academy started on June 7th. And we are here today to learn from our partners at Kroll what they have found and put in their final reports, and then an update from our police department, and our interim chief is here to provide that presentation. So to kick things off, I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Office of Police Oversight, who has been tasked with really leading this project. And I really want to thank Farah for her diligence in this effort. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to Farah.
Thank you, Manager. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Thank you for this opportunity to present the final report from our consultants, Kroll and Associates. We are joined this afternoon by Mark Ellers, Rick Brown, and Dan Linsky. And as you know, they presented their preliminary analysis to you in March. This is a presentation of their final report, and I will just presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Farah, and good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be back in front of you again. Will I have the ability to share the screen at this time? Okay, I was actually going to share a different set of slides, if that's possible. There we go. Thank you. Okay, can everyone hopefully see that?
We can, thank you.
Great, thank you. So again, thank you and good afternoon. I just want to... City Hall. I'm sorry? So for the next just 15 minutes or so, we want to highlight our overall assessment of the Police Training Academy that's contained in our final report of April 23rd. Hopefully you've all had a chance to at least receive a copy of that. Understanding it's a long report, so we're just going to try to highlight over the next few minutes some updated findings and recommendations that were not reflected in our preliminary report that we submitted at the end of February and presented to you on March 2nd. So as we state in our report on April 23rd, and consistent with national best practices, Kroll is recommending that the Austin Police Department shift from a stress-oriented military-style academy toward a resiliency-based approach supported by adult learning and student-centered instruction, that they adopt a guardian-centric or caretaking training model that emphasizes service to the community, and that they become an evidence-based learning organization. And we believe that by doing so, the Austin Police Department will essentially develop into a transformational best-in-class police academy. Now, in section 4 of our report, there's about a 20-page section that discusses best practices in police training academies across the United States. And our research shows that academies with success in building resilient caretaker police departments are ones that move away from a warrior mentality, reframe police culture into a community-oriented service provider with less emphasis on a paramilitary style of policing, that educates cadets on the history of how policing in the United States has impacted communities of color and affected how the police are perceived in certain communities, as well as the lack of trust that comes with that are not afraid to include civilian leadership in senior academy positions, and who emphasize respectful and constitutional policing. So our report highlights a number of programs that we believe should be part of all police academies, including on such topics as procedural justice, community policing, de-escalation training, crisis intervention team training, peer intervention and implicit bias training, programs on officer wellness, and training on psychological skills such as cognitive development and emotional intelligence. And while the Austin Police Department Training Academy covers certainly some or all of these areas in part, we've included additional recommendations at the end of our final report that address gaps in what we perceive to be APD's current training practices from best practices. Now, since we last addressed the council in early March, we've updated some findings that were contained in our preliminary report, and we'll highlight some of them over the next few slides. So first, based on the numbers provided to us as of March 31st, the 144th cadet class remains on track to be among the most diverse cadet classes in APD history. At present, nearly 58% of cadets identify as either Black, Hispanic, Asian, or multiracial, and approximately 20% are female. In addition, Academy staff is also more diverse, with approximately 43% of staff identifying as Black, Latino, Asian, or multiracial. Although only 10% of the training unit are made up of women, several of its top leaders are currently female, and over 1/4 of the cadet training division is female. And as the lower chart reflects, the recruiting unit also is fairly diverse, with over 50% of the recruiting unit staff identifying as either Black or Hispanic. Now, one of the significant developments since we last spoke to you was on March 15th, the police department hired Dr. Ann Cringen to fill the vacant organizational development and training manager position, and they made her a division manager with the equivalent rank of commander. And then on March 31st, this institutional backing was affirmed by Interim Chief Joseph Chacon and Assistant Chief James Mason when they met with Academy staff. On April 1st, Dr. Cringen submitted plans to update all curriculum with a focus on adult learning methods and to ensure that diversity, equity, and inclusion content is incorporated throughout the Academy. She's also working to ensure a proper balance between academic style learning, physical and tactical training, disciplinary measures, and chain of command structures. Significantly, Dr. Cringen was a police officer before she pursued her PhD in criminal justice from Texas State University, and she's conducted extensive research into policing, including on such issues as mental illness stigma, crisis intervention, gender imbalances in policing, community policing through community engagement, and identifying barriers to Black applicants in police employment. With the assistance of Dr. Cringen, the Academy has updated its job descriptions for instructor positions to require that instructors model professional behavior and communication and exhibit appropriate behavior and language, among other things, that they utilize procedural justice practices such as treating citizens with respect and decision-making based on facts instead of biases, and that they maintain an appropriate and professional classroom atmosphere and training environment to engage students and facilitate learning. The job descriptions further emphasize that to become an instructor at the Academy, one must be able to communicate in ways that display empathy and understanding, be able to apply emotional intelligence skills to understand and collaborate with the community and build trusting relationships, know effective community policing strategies and practices, know the diverse cultural groups that make up Austin, know appropriate techniques for de-escalating situations and contacts. One should be able to establish effective working relationships with the diverse cultural and social groups in Austin, and they must have good listening skills and the ability to maintain professionalism during difficult interactions with law enforcement. Essentially, the instructors are to model the type of officer we're trying to create and develop in the department, recognizing that it all starts with training. Now, another top priority of the Academy and Dr. Cringen is establishing an Academy Curriculum Review Committee to help transition the Academy to a blended civilian police-led training institute with a strong community focus. And to do this, the committee is to consist of the division manager, is Dr. Cringen, and a soon-to-be hired training supervisor. It will have at least 2 Academy instructors specifically selected to serve on that committee, at least 2 outside academic experts, 3 or 4 outside community representatives, and representatives from each of these city agencies: Victim Services, Equity Office, and Office of Police Oversight. And the purpose of the committee is to review all diversity, equity, and inclusion content, to evaluate and recommend outside academic and subject matter experts and community participants, and to ensure appropriate emphasis on DEI content, as well as de-escalation training and trauma-informed training. Now, pages 55 to 66 of our final report evaluated the Academy's cultural competency training, which focused particularly on the courses listed here. There's 12 of them. And we recommended updates and revisions to some of these courses in order to keep them current and prevent a quote unquote check the box approach to this training. And those recommended revisions and updates are incorporated into an additional short-term recommendation we can talk about shortly. We also noted in our preliminary report that the Academy has added approximately 30 hours of community engagement or lived experiences programming for a total of, I believe, 36 to 37 hours. And we've asked that Academy staff broaden the list of organizations and potential community partners that they've reached out to and that we included in our preliminary report to expand their outreach to include the organizations listed here and others, including critics of the department. Now, as noted in our preliminary report, the Community Video Review Panel made a number of recommendations that called for eliminating biases in training materials, developing more effective teaching methods, building community trust, and addressing systemic change. And we've attempted to address these issues in our recommendations in the report. And in response, the department has established a formal process and begun the second phase of the community panel's work, which will review and provide input on training videos not previously reviewed. And the work of the panel will continue to be a joint collaboration between the community representatives and Academy instructors. Now, Section 7 of our report outlines our short-term and long-term recommendations. Most of these are unchanged from our preliminary report, or they've been updated slightly to reflect developments over the past several weeks. But we did add a few recommendations. One was a short-term recommendation. It's recommendation number 17, I believe on page 97 of our report. And this is to update and revise the cultural competency training courses that we discussed on pages 55 to 66, specifically these courses listed here, so forth. And then we've also added several long-term recommendations to address identified gaps from best practices. And these are specifically long-term recommendations 8 through 11, which are on page 99 of our report. And they urge the Academy to develop additional content on procedural justice. That's recommendation number 8. Collaborate with mental health advocacy organizations outside of CIT training or in addition to CIT training. That's number 9. To develop a formal peer intervention training program, such as Project ABLE or Ethical Policing is Courageous, two programs that are being adopted by agencies across the country and that are very promising. APD is currently looking at both, and as I understand it, plans to adopt at least one of these or something similar, and we're just asking that be done as part of the long-term recommendations. Also, we've recommended that the department consider ways to incorporate content on cognitive decision-making and emotional intelligence and effective social interaction skills. That's number 11. And then the last several long-term recommendations all address aspects of the department's field training officer program. Recommendation number 12 was already included in our preliminary report, but we've added 4 more related to the FTO program. They're in numbers 13 to 16, and they're on pages 99 to 100 of our final report. As we suggested previously, the only way to determine how effective any of these changes are carried out and whether they have the intended effect is to evaluate the Academy in action and then come back and report on further adjustments and needed measures moving forward. We're happy to address any questions on the independent evaluator process. And then with respect to APD implementation of our recommendations to date, we would note that over the past 2 months, we've continued to consult with Academy leadership, which has accepted our recommendations and has been working diligently to implement them. Just to highlight some of the, I think, key measures that have been done to date that are quite significant for this new Academy is the increased civilian leadership that exists now with the division manager and training supervisor positions, as well as the Academy Curriculum Review Committee, which includes community and academic representation. They've expanded community engagement programming to include the 30 additional hours of community engagement lived experiences programming, as well as adding a 2-week community immersion orientation program, which will be in place for the 144th Academy. The department has increased emphasis on racial equity issues with anti-racism training pursuant to groundwater analysis racial equity training of James Joyce Consulting. And that's going to be for Academy staff as well as cadets as part of the curriculum. They've also added an 8-hour course on the history of police and race in America that will be co-taught by a subject matter expert from the community. They formalized the process for the community video review panel. They've expanded physical fitness training and adopted fewer week-long blocks of technical course content. And they have less emphasis now on military-style training. They've eliminated such things as sandpits and sandbags, and they've eliminated or essentially changed what used to be called Fight Day or Will to Win is now a self-defense exercise near the end of Academy after cadets have had an opportunity to be trained properly on techniques. So as a result, the Academy program now covers 34 weeks, which is increased from 26 weeks, which is where it was when we first sort of started this process. So in a sense, they've essentially added 8 weeks of programming to the Academy, and they've incorporated increased community participation and civilian oversight, a de-emphasis on military-style training, increased emphasis on diversity, equity, inclusion, and adult learning methods, and increased emphasis on officer safety and wellness and mentorship programs. And just by way of comparison, if you exclude European police agencies, many of which have much longer training programs than in the United States, Austin's training program is now longer than many other comparable police departments in Texas and throughout the United States. So with the plan set forth by the division manager to achieve all short-term recommendations by May 31st, we believe a state of readiness for the 144th Cadet class is achievable by the start of this summer, with the caveat that there be an independent evaluation of the Academy performed once it's up and running. So ultimately, a lot of hard work remains to be done to establish the long-term foundation for a resiliency-based, community-oriented police department, but we see no reason why this cannot be accomplished going forward. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or proceed however you, and I'll stop sharing the screen at this point.
Thank you. Manager, do you have anything before or? Before we ask questions, do you guys have anything?
Do we want to hear from APD first? Or?
Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. If we can bring up the PowerPoint that you had started to put up for Kroll and Associates. That is the one. All right, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor, Council members, City Manager, Joseph Chacon, Interim Chief of Police. I'm very pleased to be discussing our reimagined pilot police cadet academy and the progress that we've made on the blueprint pursuant to the council resolution. The blueprint laid out 23 tasks that would need to be completed prior to beginning a new academy class. And I'm here to report on the progress of those tasks and to assure you that these tasks will all be completed prior to the proposed June 7th start date for the academy. Of the 23 tasks, 11 have been completed and the remainder are all in various stages of completion. I'll start by giving a very high-level overview of the progress since March and the timeline for completion, and then proceed to highlight each of the tasks and give you a greater level of detail for each that will help to answer your questions and provide the level of assurance that I know you need in order to know that this reimagined academy class is headed in the right direction. Next slide, please. So beginning in March, as mentioned, a new training division manager, Dr. Ann Kringen, was hired and began her work at that time. She began with evaluating the course schedule in order to implement active learning components and began her academic curriculum review for all the courses that are taught during the duration of the academy. We began adding new course content, including the history of race and policing course that was mentioned, and ensuring that all courses are being evaluated to incorporate diversity, equity, and inclusion content. We also developed an evidence-based exit interview and follow-up process for those cadets who leave the academy prior to graduation. Moving to April, we began the process of hiring a training supervisor, and we should have that person fully onboarded by this month. We've conducted significant outreach to community organizations to play a part in long-term curriculum review, providing community members to assist with instruction, and as mentioned, formalizing a final video review process. The finalized course schedule includes a significant upgrade, which is a 2-week pre-academy pilot program known as Community Connect. This workshop will provide new cadets an immersive experience in the Austin community and its community members. The process of identification, selection, and retention of subject matter experts and community members to teach in selected courses was also achieved. And finally, the Kroll report was issued and an action plan developed to implement the recommendations of the report. Coming this month in May, Academy faculty continues to receive instruction and guidance in adult learning theory, as well as all faculty will go through Ms. Joyce James' groundwater analysis course. We continue to conduct final reviews of pilot courses that will enter long-term academic review, final review of any videos to be used, and developing a field training officer refresher course. We'll finalize the procurement of a learning management system and retain independent evaluation of courses to ensure that the recommended changes have been implemented. Community Connect begins for Academy cadets on June the 7th and will run for 2 weeks. And then in-class instruction would begin on June 21st. The assessment will be continuous and ongoing, asking the questions: which changes worked? What elements met community expectations? What instructional practices were not effective, and which elements need additional revision? I feel quite confident that all of these measures, which I will detail in the next few slides, will all be completed on time and in full, thanks to all of our partners who helped us get to this point. Next slide, please. So I know that we're running a little short on time today. I'm going to try to get through all of these as quickly and efficiently as I can, but I don't want to overlook or minimize any of these steps as they're all very crucial. So I'm going to begin with the March tasks. As discussed, we've hired the first one hired our new training division manager, Dr. Ann Kringen, and we are marking that step as complete. The second, we have evaluated the academy course schedule in order to implement active learning opportunities. All lesson plans have been reviewed and revised and include at least one active learning component. So active learning components are instructional techniques that incorporate discussion, practice, review, and application, and are a large part of adult learning theory and activities. These have proven to be much more effective in helping learners to process and retain new information. The third, we have established an Academy Curriculum Review Committee. The committee members have been selected and contracts are being approved for all the members. We are marking this task as complete. The committee members come from a cross-section of our community, including community members, members from the Equity Office, from Victim Services, and from APD. I'll be talking more about the academic curriculum review in a few slides. The fourth, which is the 8-hour history of race and policing course, has been implemented into our academy schedule, and this task is also completed. Just as background, the course History of Policing and Race in America was created through a collaborative effort between the Office of Police Oversight and the University of Texas School of Law, and it will be taught by subject matter experts. The fifth, course content evaluation has begun and is underway. So the lesson plan revision was divided into 2 phases. In phase 1, it was reviewed to ensure that the content is current per TCOL standards. It links back to a learning objective and has at least one active learning activity in each lesson plan. In phase 2, there'll be a number of objectives, including analyzing each lesson plan to include content related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, ensuring each lesson includes presentations of ideas visually, so for instance, using graphs or infographics, that each lesson plan has an assessment component to ensure achievement of the learning objective, and that all lesson plans include at least one current event or a local example that is relevant to each unit goal. Full content evaluation will be complete no later than June 4th. Number 6, a new exit interview and follow-up procedure has been designed and implemented, and this task is now complete. The new exit interview tool is evidence-based and thereby eliminating any potential bias in the interviews, and will be more helpful in producing usable data for Academy staff to have better retention rates in future classes. Next slide, please. The training supervisor hire is in the final stages, and we will have that individual onboarded this week. This person will be assisting Dr. Kremian in the coordination of all of these tasks and will be instrumental moving forward in keeping everything on pace. We will very quickly be moving this task to the completed column. Number 8, APD staff has conducted outreach with established and new community members and partner organizations to assist with instruction and community immersion. They come from a broad spectrum of our community and include the following organizations: Life Anew Restorative Justice, Just Liberty, Jail to Jobs, the Austin Area Urban League, Measure, Mobilos and Fishes, the NAACP, the Consulate General of Mexico, and many others. We are going to be marking this task as complete. Number 9, the video review process has been completed. The committee members have met 3 times since the middle of March. And in order to continue the video review work, contract terms have been delivered to the members of the committee last week. So those meetings will be ongoing, and there's another one this week. And I'll talk a little bit more about the video review process in just a little bit. Number 10, the course schedule had been previously completed. However, the Kroll recommendations required us to add some additional physical fitness hours, which is being worked into the schedule now. So we have moved this task back into the ongoing column, but once that is completed, we will be moving it back to completed, and that should be shortly. Number 11, the Community Connect Pre-Academy Workshop is almost complete. The content has been finalized, and almost all of the organizations and panelists have been confirmed. There is still some community input on design that is ongoing. And again, this is one of those tasks that will be moving to completed very soon. Number 12, we continue to identify those courses that can and should be either taught or co-taught by members of our community. We're finalizing the contracts with all the instructors and should have those completed by May 21st, at which time this task will be marked as completed. Number 13, this task is related to the last task, number 12, and is on the same timeline. We should have all of the contracts executed and in place by May 21st. Number 14, we received the report from Kroll Associates on April 23rd and have been working on analysis of all of the recommendations. We plan to have all remaining recommendations implemented by June the 4th. As you heard just a few moments ago directly from Kroll, APD has been in constant communication and contact with them to ensure that the steps we are taking are actually fulfilling the recommendations and that they approve those. Number 15, we've incorporated adult learning theory elements into all of our academy courses. So I touched on this briefly earlier, and adult learning theory really contains 5 key assumptions and elements. The first is self-concept. Adults are more independent than children and prefer self-directed learning. The second, adult learner experience. Adults have more experiences than children and learn better when we incorporate those experiences. The third is a readiness to learn. Adults want to understand the reason why they are learning. And so we are incorporating those type of things into our courses and how that knowledge relates to the ultimate goal. The fourth is developing an orientation of learning. Adults want to learn more practical skills than general knowledge. It helps them solve problems and work better. And then finally, the motivation to learn, and that is developing the intrinsic value that people will get from the process of learning. So all of these elements are being worked into the curriculum, and we are marking this task as complete. Number 16, the process. The process for ongoing Academy faculty evaluation and review is being developed at this time. We've contracted with instructors from Texas State University to develop this process, and it will be completed prior to June 4th. Number 17, I spoke earlier about the implementation of the groundwater analysis course for the Academy faculty and for the cadets. All of that will be completed prior to beginning the sit-down portion of the Academy. We're also putting all of the command and executive staff for the department that have not yet been through that course, through that training over the next few weeks. Number 18, the first meeting with the Equity Office occurred on April 27th, and another meeting is scheduled for this month. So as background, the Equity Office conducted an assessment that essentially was a SWOT analysis and resulted in many of the same recommendations that are in the Kroll report. As a result, there is significant overlap between those two efforts. The equity assessment can really be broken down into 4 key areas. First, engaging the Equity Office in changes within the Academy related to equity issues. This was the initial meeting that kicked off the effort, and subsequent meetings will be held. Secondly, implementing specific revisions to Academy curriculum and course materials. To accomplish this, we added the History of Policing course into the curriculum, and all curriculum material is being reviewed as part of phase 2, as I discussed. Third, implementing personnel changes to increase diversity among Academy staff. We've already made some staffing changes, as you heard during the Kroll presentation, and have increased our diversity with the staff, and we're working to further diversify our staff in the future. And finally, implementing internal assessments to quantify equity issues. So we will be collecting a substantial amount of new information as noted in this blueprint. It will include things like cadet injuries, reasons for separation, completion rates, and all of those things, including our exit interview process and survey, will help us to address the equity concerns. So this action plan will be completed prior to June 4th. Number 19, the review process for Academy curriculum review is being established through a series of meetings occurring during the month of May and early June. A total of 4 meetings will occur. The first was yesterday, May 3rd. There's another one on May 10th, then May 24th, and finally on June 7th with the review committee members in order to ensure that everyone understands the clear path forward in the coming months for the full Academy curriculum review, or as I'll refer to it just as ACR. The ACR will be organized into 3 working groups, which will include a non-academic community member, an academic community member, and an APD officer in each group, as well as at least 1 staff member from the Office of Police Oversight, from Victim Services, and from the Austin Equity Office. These groups will work together to evaluate and recommend revisions to the Academy curriculum, providing a variety of different perspectives. Each work group will be responsible for reviewing 1 lesson plan per month. Areas that they are reviewing for are diversity, equity, inclusion content, verifying active learning components, verifying that de-escalation components are included in every lesson, that there are community teaching components where possible, the addition of Spanish language instruction in many lesson plans, and that we have an acceptable implementation of trauma-informed training in these lesson plans. So this will be an ongoing effort prior to and during the Academy and going forward. Next slide, please. The video review committee will continue throughout the length of the Academy, and no videos will be shown without approval of that committee. As you know, the committee has been working for several months and has offered valuable insight into the video selection process. Very importantly, they are developing the lens through which our Academy staff will work through in the future when wanting to bring forth videos for use in instruction. So contracts for the committee members are in place and that task is now complete. Number 21, in order to ensure that we're incorporating trauma-informed practices into all of our training modules, I've kind of gone over the steps of how we are doing that on a large scale, but members of the Victim Services Unit will be participating in the Academy curriculum review and will also be participating in Academy role play scenario-based training. They'll be co-teaching the victims of crime and domestic violence courses, and they are currently revising those lesson plans. So this task will be completed by June 4th and is ongoing. Number 22, we have begun the process to select a vendor for our new learning management system. We have a second round of vendor evaluation scheduled for the week of May 10th, and we hope to have this done by the beginning of the Academy. And finally, we have retained Kroll Associates as the independent evaluator as they discussed during their presentation, and this task is now complete. Next slide, please. So just two other key elements that we thought were important to discuss in this reimagined cadet class that are not listed in the blueprint, but they are noteworthy, and I'll just briefly describe them. With the approval of the Joyce James Consulting Group contract, there will be the development and expansion of a mentoring program for our cadets. So we have had a women's mentoring group in existence for some time now. And the next that will be developed with the assistance of Ms. James and her group is a mentorship program for our African-American cadets. And then finally, we are developing a refresher course for our FTOs and ensuring that their training is also in line with the new direction of the Academy, specifically with regards to the elements of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This course will be fully developed and implemented prior to the end of the 144th Cadet Academy class, when cadets would begin their FTO training. Next slide, please. So just in conclusion, I want to assure Mayor and Council, as well as our community, that we're working diligently and urgently to fulfill our commitment to reimagining our Cadet Training Academy, and that we are delivering instruction in line with the expectation that we are building efficient, capable, caring guardians of our community. I thank you for your time and attention, and I'll be standing by for any questions that we may have.
Thank you, team from Kroll and Chief. I really appreciate that explanation, analysis, and again, we stand for questions, but really look forward to the continuing work and all the ongoing efforts to do this reimagined academy. Mayor?
All right, thank you, Manager. Councilmember Alder.
Thank you. Appreciate all the work that went into this report, both by our consultants and our staff on various teams, and also the insights of the Reimagining Task Force as well. I have a couple questions that I'd like some further clarity, and some of them, to some degree, Chief Chacon, you answered, but I'd like them kind of maybe condensed and focused on a particular topic. There was much more in your presentation than what was on the sheets, so you touched on it. I want to recognize that we have a really phenomenal team of victim services counselors at APD, and we've heard a desire from that unit to be more involved in the academy training, and they've offered to help intertwine the trauma-informed approaches more holistically throughout the academy curriculum. We also received a recommendation from the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force to extend the number of hours that cadets spend on victim services from 16 up to 30. That recommendation also included building victim services into ongoing training, the field training officer program, and recertification, and then increasing just competency and trauma-informed approaches to victims and survivors, I think, is just critical to transforming policing. So I wanted to ask Chief Chacon if you could speak a little bit more to how victim services role in the academy will be expanded, and how we are incorporating their work into the academy as well as throughout the department consistently. And I know you did touch on this in pieces, but I want to kind of understand it together rather than via the bullets. And if you can also speak to the number of hours that roughly amounts to, or get back to me with that if you don't have that at your fingertips.
Certainly, and I appreciate the question, council member. So they'll be teaching 2 classes directly, which I would directly count as hours. The first is the Victims of Crime course, which is a 10-hour course, and then the Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault Investigations, which is an 8-hour course. So that's 18 hours, which I can directly attribute to kind of that victim service role, as well as what we're doing in the academy curriculum review process. So we're bringing in every single course that we look at, and we're making those changes. We have a member of the victim services unit that will be injecting and putting those trauma-informed pieces into that process to make sure that we are looking from a victim-centered, trauma-informed lens at every single course. So whether, regardless of whatever it is that we're of the course that is being taught, that they have a focus on that, and that can come forward during the instruction. During the role play part of it, which is so crucial for our cadets, we'll have victim services there during that time. So as a role play ends and they critique afterwards and they debrief, a victim services counselor can say, you might have done a little bit more in this area. We want to certainly recognize that for victims of crime, that might be another call to the officer, but for that individual, that's the worst time in their life. And so, creating that caregiving attitude for our officers is going to be critical during those role plays as well.
Thank you. That's something that I'm definitely going to be watching and trying to see how that moves forward. I think those lessons are extremely important as we want to shift to more of a guardian approach and being able to understand those perspectives. And we've seen again and again within the justice system how important it is to really have a deeper understanding, say, of domestic violence or some of the things that the victims are experiencing through that process. I want to flag for my colleagues that I am planning probably an amendment to the resolution that will just speak a little bit more specifically to some minimal reporting requirements, some of which may already be planned, but kind of reiterating some of the things that we had last month when we moved forward with the blueprint in there to make sure that those are transparently happening, because I think that sunshine on this process and council attention is important to reassure our community that we are committed, that this is a pilot and we're learning from this pilot, and we're moving, we're moving forward, but this is a pilot and we have to learn, and we have to be incorporating lessons as we move forward, and we may not get it all right this time, but that we're going to be very intentional about that. So the last thing that I wanted to ask is that, reflecting on the process of how we got here, we had a lot of reports, from a number of different consultants, all kind of leading to the same conclusion. One of the observations that we observed was friction between the academy staff and Dr. Villanueva, who had a very hard task. And it's my view that we need to have full openness and a willingness to make changes from SORN staff. And we need leadership and a change at APD culture so that we can have a receptiveness to change, which is what we're seeking through the changes in the academy. Obviously, we have new leadership at the academy, and I've heard nothing but fabulous things about the work that Dr. Kringen has already got underway and the way that she has just gotten running and moving things forward, or we wouldn't really be here today. I also understand, though, there's a chain of command culture in APD. And so in order to have a transformation happen, that message has to really come from the top. And I've appreciated, Chief Chacon, your willingness to step up into this role and help us move this process forward. But I'd like you to speak to the ways in which you and your direct staff are supporting Dr. Kringen and ensuring that sworn staff respect and embrace her work.
Thank you, Council Member. As mentioned during the Kroll presentation, shortly after Dr. Kringen was hired, myself, Commander Mason, Assistant Chief Mason, Commander Johnson, all met with every member of the training staff out there, with Dr. Kringen in attendance. And I welcomed her and made it very clear that she was the training division manager and that she is at the level where she is a peer to Commander Johnson and is a direct report to the Assistant Chief over that bureau. So, her direction where we needed to go was to be followed. And the response has been very, very good from our staff. I think just clearly understanding what the direction and the instructions were coming directly from me and from the other members of leadership has helped to set that tone. And we have not had issues with that, some of the issues that you're discussing that we'd seen in the past. Dr. Kringen brings a very good manner with her to how she conducts the work and has been very well received by our staff.
Thank you.
Councilor Dan Linsky from Kroll. If I could just add my thoughts on that. We did see tensions between the civilian director that was previously there and staff. We flagged them as issues and concerns, and we get comments from both sides on that. There's reasons and cause for those tensions. I had a similar situation in my prior department with the senior policy advisor that I had some tension with homicide unit commanders, and it took us going and changing that homicide unit commander and having a conversation saying that this is the direction we decided to go in, and we want to make sure we've got full support here. And I cannot tell you the actions of the chief and the assistant chief going out there having that conversation, which is something that hadn't occurred previously, is exactly what needs to happen to set the tenor and tone and to help rebuild a new police academy with a new culture and sense of purpose. So it was exactly what we were hoping for and exactly what we saw.
I just want to reiterate that too. I think that the tone is key. I mean, there's obviously a lot of specifics that are in this report, and there need to be, because there were a lot of specifics that were raised by the consultants leading up to this. Best as I can tell in going through it, I think that you caught the ones that I had identified, and I appreciate the exhaustive work. Chief Chacon, I want to thank you for leaning into this process because I think that you set at a high level what that tone is, and I think that you've been leaning into what this community has been trying to do, even with your visits up at the state legislature and the like, as well as the comments you've given to the media, and I appreciate that. I also want to thank Farah for the work that she's doing. She's at a pretty pivotal place in this whole conversation, also not an easy place to be in, and seem to be negotiating that really well. My question real fast, Manager, goes to you. Part of the blueprint process had us not only identifying what the staff and stakeholders would be doing relative to the identified issues, but also some measure of certification from you. I'd like to know how you're approaching that and what you think your timeline is with respect to that.
Thanks, Mayor. As you know, and as you've heard today, this is an ongoing effort, and we continue to make significant strides in achieving the recommendation or responding to the recommendations that came from these reports. We have now hired Kroll as an independent evaluator, and so they will be really tasked with having not just this kind of certification as you're describing coming from within the city, but making sure that's done from an outside perspective. I know Farah has been thinking about this a little bit more, so I'm going to ask if she wants to add anything, but we really have this additional insight into if we're ready to go or not based on the actions that are going to be taken in the next few weeks, and have the way that Kroll has already been looking at and evaluating if we're ready, and they will continue to do that going forward. Ms. Muscadin?
Thank you, Mayor Chair. I think I can answer that question in two parts. The first part is that we already know that Kroll has evaluated the short-term recommendations and the implementation of that. They've been reviewing and getting information from Dr. Kurnian of all the changes that they've made thus far. So I think that that is a form of certification. And then additionally, the way that we drafted the scope of work for the independent evaluator is to parallel the blueprint. And it matches the three parts that we set out with the transformative change, culture of adult learning, and community involvement. And it's specifically tied to tasks under those particular areas of the blueprint that Kroll will be looking into. They will be assessing regularly. We've set it up where they will meet with the academy staff on a monthly basis. They will be participating in classes both in person and virtually. And so it provides them an opportunity to give in real time feedback to the academy so that they can adjust and feedback in a way that supports the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And so I think I'm answering that question in two parts in terms of, one, we have a form of certification in terms of PD status on the short-term recommendations, but then we do kind of have an ongoing certification in terms of how they're going to be assessing the progress and the implementation during the pilot academy.
That's good, and I think, manager, you should avail yourself of advice. I think that the council's resolution required you to make that certification, and I think that was significant because it's you that will communicate to the community your personal assessment. Councilmember Kitchen.
Yes, thank you. First off, I want to say thank you to everyone that's been involved in this. I know it's been a lot of work for all of you, and I appreciate the efforts that's been going into this. I want to thank you, Chief, for going over each of the 23 items in detail. I think that has been so helpful to help the community see that attention was paid to each one of those items, and the way that you presented it with a status report on each one and additional information on the key ones has been very helpful. So I really want to say that I appreciate that. I have one question that you, again, similar to what Councilmember Allison Alter said, you did kind of cover this, but I'd like to reiterate it. And that is, one aspect of certification that we did talk about previously was the community involvement. And I know that we have talked about or you talked about the participation of community members on the ACR, and also talked about the fact that this is an iterative process, as well as what we just talked about with regard to the role of Kroll. But I'd like you to just specifically reiterate for us what the role is for the community in reviewing this process and actually being a part of this certification.
Thank you, Council Member. So just to kind of review, one of the most important things that they're doing is the ACR. So being a part of that, and they will be involved in the long-term review of all of our courses. They've also been involved in our video review committee, so they and will continue to be involved in that portion. The new Community Connect piece is going to, be primarily community members that will all be, as well as some either advocacy-based or systems-based advocates that our cadets will interact with at the beginning of the academy. We're bringing in community members wherever we can to help teach and co-teach all of the different courses that I'm talking about, including the history of race and policing in America, and some of the other courses where DEI is so important. And then finally, what I would say is that we have plans to have many of our courses be monitored by community members going throughout the academy. They won't be in every single class, but on the ones that we know that we think is crucial and that the community has a high interest in to make sure that we're teaching it, that they will have the ability to kind of monitor how that's going and provide the input so that we can take it and implement it in the future.
Thank you, Chief. The other thing that you mentioned, that there's a number of the items that were on the blueprint that are in process that are scheduled to be completed by June 4th. And so I think it would be helpful to have a process for reporting back to us upon their completion. That may be part of what Councilmember Alter was referring to in her amendment, which is great if that's what she was thinking of. But I just want to ask you, Chief, can you commit to some kind of process to let us know as those are completed prior to the start date of the academy?
Absolutely, and I'll work with the city manager and city staff to make sure how that reporting goes, to make sure that you get the timely reports.
Thank you.
Councilmember Fuentes.
Thank you. My questions are building off of the questions that were previously raised. So with the Kroll assessment, and I like that they're an independent evaluator and that they're going to be giving, it's an iterative process and they'll be giving real-time feedback as the pilot academy goes along. Will council receive a report at the end of the pilot academy of the findings of things that were tweaked or any parts of the academy curriculum that still need to be changed? I'm just not sure if that is formally part of the process, or is it that we'll be getting bi-monthly updates on how the academy is going?
I'll take that, Farrah.
Yes. Council member, the way we drafted the scope of work is that there would be an initial report, and we did that report midway through the pilot academy. So approximately the date in the scope of work is October 18th. And then the final report would be issued on March 7th of 2022.
Okay, great. So we'll get 2 reports then. And then my second question is, now since we'll potentially be doing a pilot academy and we'll have cadets who reimagine process, how can we, Chief, if you can talk through, how can we ensure that the culture of the department that they'll be walking into once they graduate will embrace those reforms and will be open and welcome to the reforms? And if you could speak a little bit to that effort.
Certainly. Thank you, council member. And I'll just tell you that I've been working with executive and command staff on all of the, what we're talking about through the reimagination process. I did mention that whatever members have not been through the groundwater analysis course of our leadership cadre will be going through it within the next few weeks. And I have already been through that course. It's an amazing course. It's one that I think opens a lot of people's eyes about the way that police are viewed in the community. And it lays some good groundwork for what we're trying to accomplish moving forward. Then the expectation will be, is being set and will continue to be set that we are, as mentioned earlier, that we're really leaning into all of the changes that our community would like to see be made with the Austin Police Department. We still have a responsibility to maintain public safety, and we will maintain that responsibility. But at the same time, how those services are delivered will be, that's why we are making the changes that we are to the academy, because we do want to create those guardians and those caregivers that really is their role the vast majority of the time.
Thank you. Yes, I think that's so important. I'm grateful to hear your commitment to that, because those are what I'm thinking of is like once they graduate, what kind of department culture are they walking into, and will that department culture align to the reformations that are being made. So I appreciate that.
Colleagues, anything else before we go back? Councilmember Mayor Pro Tem, and then Councilmember Alter.
Thank you. I think most of my questions have been answered over the last several months. I just wanted to echo the appreciation for everybody who's been doing this very valuable, important work. And I feel a distinct sense of appreciation for the work that the community members have done as well, in which case I want to also echo the appreciation for what they've contributed. I do look forward to on Thursday. I know we have a 5 o'clock time certain, so I'm trying to be mindful of that. And so I do look forward to a little bit more conversation on Thursday, because there are a couple of things that have been brought to my attention by way of members of the community, and just want to make certain that there's room for continued discussion with community members.
Okay. If it's okay, we haven't heard yet from Councilmember Ellis. Councilmember Ellis, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I know Councilmember Alter had her hand up too. I do look forward to seeing the amendments that she might be bringing, because I agree with her line of thinking on this matter. And I think what's really most important is that we maintain this line of transparency and understanding that a pilot class is something that will continue to be reviewed, continue to have public input, and that it needs to be an opportunity for us to really fine tune it and make sure that it is operating in the way that we really need it. Much community input along the way that I and my colleagues are so appreciative of. But we absolutely need these checks and balances just to make sure that all of our city departments are performing the work in a manner that is consistent with our values throughout the community. So I do look forward to seeing Councilmember Alter's updates and continuing to have this conversation over the next few weeks.
Thank you. Councilmember Alter did have her hand raised, but she nodded when I asked if it was okay to recognize you. Councilmember Alter.
Yeah, and I was waiting to see if anyone had their hand up before, and it wasn't up, so I apologize for that. So I have a question on the de-escalation long-term recommendation number 6. It is marked as complete in the Kroll report, but when I read the APD response, it seems like it's still very much underway. It says the department has plans for incorporating de-escalation training into the mandatory in-service training, but it isn't in place yet, and they will ensure videos will be reviewed, but it's really unclear if the review for de-escalation training videos has been completed. And, as has been underscored by some of my colleagues, it matters the culture into which the cadets go out. And we've talked before about the importance of the field training program and the challenges if you get conflicting signals. So this is a really important piece of the reform for the training. And I don't want to get it to get lost because it's been marked completed when it hasn't been in some ways. So my first question is, has the video review for de-escalation training been completed?
So we have, and I take it the question is for me.
Not sure who's the best person, so thank you for jumping in.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Council Member. So the video review process has completed to a point, but it's still an ongoing process to make sure that, because we had to look at every single video that we were showing previously in the academy, and specifically to eliminate those that we knew either showed bias or didn't talk about the de-escalation techniques that you were highlighting here, and we needed to bring those forward. So as our staff continues to, as I discussed, develop that lens that that is going to be the expectation for bringing videos forward, they'll bring it to the video review committee that will have to approve the use of the video, and it has to have those de-escalation components in it. During the ACR, during the curriculum review, we are going to, one of the things that they will be reviewing is, do we have de-escalation techniques that are woven through this particular lesson that they're reviewing at the time? And so that is going to happen for every single course, and we're going to look for the opportunities to continue to teach de-escalation. And then of course we have our ICAT training, which is a standalone training, the integrating communications assessment and tactics, that is a PERF model. that we have incorporated, have been teaching for some time, and will continue to teach in the academy and in service to all of our officers. So we do continue to have a very strong emphasis on de-escalation.
So on that ICAT training, as I recall, and I may have my numbers a little backwards, but our cadet academy, I think, had the training at 10 hours, but the national standard was 16. I asked about that, I think, in March, and I didn't see where that was reconciled, why we were choosing the lower amount.
So I did see that as well, council member, and I can tell you that the reason that we had installed 10 hours to begin with was because when we conducted our train the trainer with PERF, 10 hours was the length of the course. I believe that PERF has since updated and said we need to increase to 16. And so we are in the process then of looking at how are we going to increase this, given all the, all the other time constraints and demands on our time for our officers. I can tell you that in addition to that 10 hours, our in-service has already received 8 hours in the last training cycle. We'll receive another 8 hours in the coming cycle, as well as some standalone courses that have been developed that are 30 hours in length that are just about de-escalation. So we have some, in-service courses that will also be available, but we are looking to see if we could possibly find a few more hours to increase based on the new PERF recommendations.
Okay, so how will we know how that's evolving?
I think that as this continues to move forward and we continue to provide reports to council, that I'm taking it as a takeaway to see, are we going to be able to do it, or are we going to have to push it to some in-service class following graduation for those additional hours?
And it's my understanding that the way that the academy is structured, we're hearing only about the hours that are happening before they go for their field training, but it was sort of designed that there would be like in service at a later point. Can you speak to what that involves?
So
we were talking about the number of weeks. That was something that was mentioned at one point. Can you speak how that's playing out since it wasn't covered here?
Yeah, I want to make sure that I understand the question. You're asking how many hours we cover in pre-service and then how many in in-service?
Well, I had thought that when we were picking the number of weeks, that part of the rationale was that you wanted to come back and like reinforce stuff at a later date, and it was planned to do that. But we haven't heard anything about that part of the training. So it's my understanding that we were doing the academy of the 30-some weeks, and then they were going out to do the field training, and then there was some, I don't know, point in time between the field training and going out in the field, but there was the expectation there'd be another period of time as part of their sort of initial training, even though it'd be after their field training.
Sure.
Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, yes, you are. Some of that training has been delayed because we were teaching intermediate courses during our cadet training class to kind of get people ahead of schedule into getting that more advanced training. And simply at that point, and this is talking previously, that we had extended the length of the academy so that we could do that. We also talked about introducing the second week of crisis intervention training during the academy time. And actually, when we came back and, for instance, revisited that one course, it actually made sense to give them the first week, which was the basic CIT course, have them go into the field with a field training officer, take these calls so that they had a better understanding, and then bring them back for the second part that they would complete prior to coming off of probation. So there are going to be some courses that it's absolutely critical in order to get them even licensed that have to happen during the academy, as we know it, the 34 weeks. And then there's some other ones that we can push a little bit, and we still want to do it in a timely manner, but in order to use our time the best, and also to kind of conform with best practices, that we want to push just a little bit, either to the end of their, during their probation period, at the end of their probation period, but prior to making them fully functional officers.
Thank you. So perhaps when you report back in June, you could give us a little bit more of an outline of what that plan is, because I understand that we're saying the academy is over at 34 weeks, but in terms of the training, I see that as part of what we're delivering, and so it'd be helpful if that's ready. And obviously you have 30 some weeks until that happens, so it might not be fully fleshed out, but if you could give us a sense of the process, that would be great. And then my last question has to do with the paramilitary culture. The Kroll report found that there was significant value in shifting away from a paramilitary culture and towards an adult learning theory model. And at our last update from Kroll, we heard hesitancy from APD about moving away from the paramilitary culture. So, Chief Chacon, aside from moving physical training away from the classroom setting and changing the Will to Win Day to Self-Defense Day, can you explain how we are structuring the academy to be more of a learning-focused environment and reducing aspects of the paramilitary training?
Sure. I appreciate that question. I think that is very important to people. I talked during the presentation about active learning components. So, the paramilitary culture really is lecture and listen. And to have people sit at attention, stand at attention, you don't speak unless you're spoken to or you're given permission to. Those are all elements of a paramilitary or a military organization. We are changing that. And it is going to become much more of that adult learning environment that I think I described as being more conducive to learning. You have, we're making sure that there are components in each one that actually incorporate the feedback and the interaction from the students, as well as tying them to either local or national events that are going on at that time, so that they see how it all relates together, and then it helps them to internalize that information much more readily. So every lesson plan has to have at least one active learning component, and there are a number of examples. And then, as I said, as we're going through this on the adult learning environment overall and how we are doing it, I gave several examples of what the key components of that are, and that we are incorporating those into the lesson plans, into that curriculum review process, so that we give our cadets an opportunity in the classroom setting to have a lot of interaction. I can tell you, when I went through the academy, that is not how it was. It was very structured and very disciplined. And we are going to be allowing people to ask those questions, to understand the why, because it's so important, I think, for adult learners to do that. And that is going to, I think in the end, is really going to produce a better police officer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Colleagues, anything else? Mayor Pro Tem?
Chief Chacon, you piqued my interest with something you just said, with your comparison about your experience as a cadet and what these cadets are going to receive with our reimagined academy. And I'm curious to know if, sort of retroactively or as continued education, if folks who've already been through academy are going to have the opportunity to be exposed to some of this new and improved curriculum.
Thank you, Councilmember, Mayor Pro Tem. I think that you will see it because we're not just doing it for pre-service, we're looking at our in-service courses as well. And, we've done that to a large extent already, because it's almost like, once you graduate from the academy and move on, the nature of the courses really changes, and it does become more of that adult learning environment where feedback is solicited, input is solicited, and there's more scenario-based, discussions and things like that. So I think that, we certainly have always seen the value of it, but I think it was important In the academy setting, that was the thinking was that's the only way we can build discipline. And I don't think that that's accurate. I think that we will be able to have good professional police officers that will graduate from our academy, even in this new kind of adult learning environment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And for what it's worth, that's something that I'll probably follow up with you on, just to sort of see where we are with that, with implementation and follow up. Because I'd really like to glean from what a seasoned officer's experience with going through the new curriculum is like. I'm curious. Thank you.
We'll go ahead and pick this conversation back up on Thursday. If there's nothing else. All right. Manager, staff, chief, others, thank you for your presentation today.